Good morning, everybody. It's a celebration in the farmyard this morning. The two geese, they're both over a quarter of a century old now, 25 years, and they're infertile. But Mildred, the female, still lays a full clutch of eggs. I don't know where they came from, and she's been incubating them for 20 days now, hardly coming off the nest, perhaps once or twice a day. And for this year, I felt so sorry for them that I've bought 4 goslings in, and I had to destroy her eggs yesterday. I checked them all in warm water before I destroyed them, and they all floated, which shows the air sac was still inside the egg, and that means they were rotten, in other words, and after another few days they would explode under her, and there'd be a dreadful smell of sulfur dioxide and sort of that rotten egg smell. And so I've taken pity on her and put these goslings, I'm gradually introducing them to her, out in a little cage with some heat on, and so they're eating some grass, and they're very, very happy. And mum and dad, or who they think's mum and dad, in close proximity the whole time. But I daren't let them out on the duck pond just yet, because the pond's got quite steep edges in places, and she will take them down there. And if a fox comes in a farmyard at night, which is quite normal, she will drop into the water and leave the goslings on the side. And of course they're quite vulnerable at this stage. They're yellow and very fluffy and quite buoyant, so I'm sure they would swim, but the weather has also been quite cool this last 7 days. We're past the middle of April already, entering the 3rd week now, and it's sort of quite interesting to think that it's only 8 weeks to the longest day, June the 21st. So there we are. Oh, lovely sound. Here they are. And they're not the only new arrivals, because on last week's podcast, I'm just going to walk down the farmyard now. We celebrated with Matthew Gudgeon, who's going to be here later on this morning. We're going to be looking at the Bluebells. We celebrated the arrival of the first 2 male swallows here, and although the wind has been coming from exactly the wrong direction, it's almost a northeasterly gentle breeze, but very cool this morning. The female swallows, the first ones, have arrived. I'm just walking down the farmyard into the stable block, and we'll just see what they're up to, because they don't mess about. They get straight on with cleaning the nests out. It's busy down here already. It's early morning. There's girls arriving to tend to their horses. And I think we're setting a new fashion here at High Ash Farm. It's called mucking out your horses with high heels on when you're all dressed up to go off to work. You do see some funny sights when you diversify on a farm. Right, I've just come into the building. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wow. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 swallows in front of me on the fluorescent lights. And 1 pair looking at me. Now I'm just walking gently down the old stable. It's the milking parlour from years ago. Oh, beautiful. I'm just going to lean against the wall. They're about 6-7 feet from me only. And I've been watching the female at first light this morning, and she's been cleaning the nest out, which you don't often see. And she'll be bringing in some new feathers, taking some feathers from her own breasts, and just arrived in the last few days. So it's all happening. Spring has really sprung, And it's such a lovely sight. It would be lovely if they burst out singing, but they're always a little bit suspicious early on till they get used to people right underneath them. Bearing in mind, just a few weeks ago, they were in South Africa and they've come up here on a diet of flies. But these are successful ones. They've made that really precarious migration northwards. It's such a lovely sight. It's quite dark and cool in here, which is perfect over the summer months for rearing their youngsters. Oh, it's such a lovely sight. Just a few feet from me. You can see that scarlet chin underneath, the creamy white breasts. And I can't see their tails because they're sitting on these very new low energy fluorescent lights. So if I walk just underneath, I'll be, oh, yep, there they go. Just flew out to the little window at the end. There's a door one end, which never gets shut, and a little window the other end, and they've just flown out. There we are, cracking start to the day. The new fashion in Norfolk, mucking out your horses with high heels on. You couldn't make it up.
Chris Skinner's Countryside Podcast with Matthew Gudgeon.
Ratty, the terrible terrier, is leading the way on our visit to High Ash Farm this morning. There he goes, exploring the hillside with the blue sky and the sunshine. A little bit chilly as well, but a beautiful morning. And Chris Skinner, this is your pride and joy here, isn't it?
Absolutely, Matthew. Once again, you're spoilt. I say this on nearly every podcast visit that you do to High Ash Farm, but you truly are spoilt this morning. And I don't mean rats scurrying about up the woodland track in front of us. We're standing on a steep south-facing escarpment here at High Ash Farm. These hills and the woodland associated with rabbit running across in front of us were probably too steep to plough with horses in centuries gone by, so they got left kind of neglected, and as a result the flora and fauna here is absolutely stunning. And the reason it's stunning is because we have a display in front of us which would grace even the most palatial gardens in the country. It's a display of bluebells. They've been here every year since I was a child and way before.
The ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our Countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We'd both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of costs we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance. I call it the living heritage, and probably been here since Roman times and probably before. And there's a little bit of mystery here where we're standing, because on the other side of this field, it's a meadow beside us with horses grazing on it. Just over there, only 200 yards from where we're standing, are two Romano-Celtic temples. And nobody has yet found the reason for those temple sites to be there. The first one was put in by the Iceni, a local tribe, and then later on, when the Roman settlement happened here in AD 43, the Romans then built a second temple on top of the first one. and there's lots of archaeology still to be discovered there. So we don't know the reason why, but it's just beginning to dawn that the original settlers, the Celts, the Iceni, worship very much the environment and the landscape. And bearing in mind, although that's a meadow and been an arable field here for many years, it was all open woodland like this. And this, what we're looking at, might well have been the reason, because the whole of this landscape would have been covered in these bluebells.
Oh, and it is a beautiful sight. All the carpet of blue here, especially in the morning sunshine coming through the trees. And I mean, what could be better, that lovely deep blue colour? And this doesn't last very long, does it?
No, it's a phenomena of about 1 month long. And these are English bluebells. It's confusing because they've changed their scientific name not once, not twice, but 3 times since I was a child. And so everybody knows them as bluebells, and when the English people think of Scotland bluebells, they think of a harebell as a Scottish bluebell, but very much it's almost the national flower of the UK, actually. It's absolutely stunning, and if we have a closer look at them, you can see all the little bells hang down on one side. So these are proper bluebells. There's a kind of interloper as well, which has the flowers all the way around the stem. These are only just opening. Because it's cool today, lots more to come down there in the plant. And some of the bulbs here, because they come into flower quite early, they come into leaf even earlier, because when you look through the trees, the sunlight's coming in underneath. This canopy closes in over the top of them. If it's beech trees, you won't find bluebells underneath them. If it's pine or coniferous woods, the soil is too acidic for the bluebells. So old oak woods like this, with venerable old knobbly oak trees all around us, jackdaws nesting in a hole just gone in behind you.
And there's a sufficient lack of leaves on the trees
at the
for
moment.
This sweet spot of the year for these flowers.
Exactly that. So from start to finish, it's a month long, and a month after that, I can take you through here, and you'd say, what's here? It's all gone. The leaves die back now. So it has to get a shift on. There are 2 lily plants growing here. One is ransoms, and that's also a lily, and that's the one, if you crush the leaves, you get a very strong smell of garlic. And the bluebell is the other one that grows here. And then in a week or so, there's a slight pink hue here, and it's a favourite spot for early purple orchid as well, growing in amongst this. So it is, you know how we look after and revere our sort of built heritage, things like cathedrals and museums and some of the venerable old buildings in London, for example. We actually almost worship them and look after them, and these are left out in the wild, but they've probably been here longer, probably since the end of the last ice age. That's why they're absolutely brilliant.
So these are the same plants,
yes,
as the Romans would have seen over there?
Yes, except the bulbs in some of them, because there's lots of rabbits digging and burrowing in here. And when I look down the rabbit holes sometimes over the winter months, I can see the bulbs, just see the edge of the bulbs, and they can be over a foot deep, because the leaf litter builds up over them. And then each year, these flowers will form little pods once they're finished. The pods then ripen over the summer months, but the pods face downwards to start with. They're like green little globes, and eventually, as they ripen, they turn upwards, and the cups then open at the top, and they have up to a dozen tiny, shiny black seeds in them, and they blow about in the autumn gales and shed the seed. And also the local pheasants absolutely love them. They walk about in the remnants of the bluebells and peck these little black seeds out. But those seeds, if they're allowed to, when they drop onto the woodland floor, the leaves then come off the trees and cover them up. So it's a beautiful little seed bed for them, if you like. And then you come here in January and you think, oh, the whole woodland floor's covered in, looks like little shafts of grass coming through, and when you look down at the base of the grass, it's a tiny little black seed, and that's the start of the next generation of bluebells. So when they find a spot like this, and everything we're looking at is just blue.
Right up the top of the hill
And it
there.
goes up to the top of the hill and over the other side. The bluebells on the other side, facing north, come into flower about a week later. So that increases the length. And this, because it's chilly this morning, I think it's only 6 or 7 degrees centigrade, the bees aren't working. But bees, moths and butterflies feed on this, and we've got quite a lot of brimstone butterflies here this year. The males are that sulphur yellow colour, and see a male brimstone flying over the top of the bluebells is a sight for sore eyes. It really
This
is.
is so precious, isn't it? We've lost so many bluebell woods over the years,
Yes.
inevitably because of the growth of population
Yes.
and wild spaces going, but this is something that's got to be cherished.
Absolutely, it should be protected and looked after, and many of these bluebell displays are in private ownership as well. So there's a lot of sort of conflict going on between the environment and social care and justice as well, and this conflict is getting more and more sort of distance apart because each one requires special treatment. And anyway, they are vulnerable because in the past years we've had lorries come into these woodlands once they're finished flowering. You can still see where the leaves are, and the bluebell bulbs get dug up, and also people will gather them, and it doesn't actually hurt the plants gathering them, but if you pull the bluebell up by the roots and you get that little white bit on the bottom, that's the bit that's attached to the bulb of the bluebell quite deep in the soil with the older bluebell bulbs, and that then depletes the bulb so it won't flower for a number of years, or it actually can kill it.
Well,
And of course,
I've got some that come up in my garden every year, and I don't know whether someone previous owner has put a bulb in or whether they were...
that's quite possible, but you need to look at them carefully because this, what we call the Spanish bluebell, has the flowers all the way around the stem, and they're a little bit more erect, they're a little bit more sort of rigid, whereas these demurely hang on one side once they're fully out. They're really, really beautiful, and I just feel very privileged to take you and share this view. It's a huge thing here on the farm, and yet it's all on the neglected land, the land that was no good for farming. Of course, the land that is good for farming feeds us, but in return it's a huge privilege to look after this. And there's 3 displays like this at High Ash Farm. One of them's got wood anemones in, mixed in with the bluebells. All 3 have early purple orchids as well. And we'll go and visit another wood in a minute just to prove that I'm not exaggerating. This one is 12 acres, and the next one we're going to see is 15 acres. And there are more flowers in the combination of those woodlands than there are people in the United Kingdom just on one farm. And it's pretty much a British phenomena as well. You can go to Europe, you do have bluebells growing there, but they're usually in small patches, nothing like this. And botanists will go to the Alps and film and get very excited about the alpine flowers, and then they'll come to the UK. If they're lucky enough to come in spring, they get just as excited with sights that we're seeing like this.
And you've laid on the sunshine as well.
Oh, of course I had to, didn't I? Yes.
Ratty, enjoying it?
He's here. He's come back. He's just skirted up this woodland ride, and he's come back soaking wet. We won't ask where he's been, but now he's heading back to the truck. He knows we're ready to visit the next wood.
Tiptoeing through not the tulips but the bluebells on the other side of the farm now, and suddenly got a bit chill, and I think there's a bit of rain in the air as well, so it's that changeable. Classic April conditions.
Yes, April showers no less, Matthew. Very welcome in the woodland here, because over the last few years we've had some incredibly dry springs after dry winter months on top of that. And so this year the woodland field layer is just verdant, is the only way to describe it. As I promised you, a second display of bluebells just a few days later, because the incline of this steep river cliff behind us is facing due west, so it doesn't get quite so much sun. But if you take a deep breath, a sniff, you can pick up that aroma of the bluebells, the perfume that's coming off, is often not mentioned because the blue kind of attracts all the attention from the senses, but the perfume, once the sun's out on them, is absolutely incredible. Anyway, we've got, I don't know how many questions this week, more questions than answers, I think.
Well, let's try this one for size. Hello, Christine Holmes, who sends us a photograph taken in the woods at Blickling. I visit there quite often, she says, and I'm intrigued as to what causes some trees to have the abnormalities that are photographed here. And then there's a photograph of a lovely tree barring these great big growths. What are they, Chris?
Yes, epicormic is the correct term for them. Epicormic. And I looked it up in the dictionary. I do know it because I did arboriculture at college as well, so I studied trees and I learnt that word, Epicormic, and it's not in my Collins dictionary, so I was quite surprised about that, but it is nonetheless the term given to what's happened to this oak tree in front of us, and it's covered, absolutely smothered from top to bottom in giant burrs. And a burr is, well, some of these, should we walk up a little bit closer? They're quite large, some of these, and this will interest foresters as well. And this is a venerable old oak, and just look, because they're really strange growths and little twigs coming out of some of them.
They're quite large, actually, aren't
Yes, they are.
they? They look like mud pies attached to the side of the trunk.
Yes, probably some of these are 600 mil across, that's 24 inches across. And there's one here that's best part of 3 feet across, extremely large indeed. And it goes right away up the trunk, and Rat's seen a horse riding through, so we know Rat's present, and he's trying to see the horse. So it's quite all right, Rat, no problems. Anyway, so what's happened is, when this woodland was forming, there'd be a huge amount of young oak trees, beech trees, maybe sycamore as well. Come here, I'm going to have to pick this dog up. He has to make an appearance, which is why I don't bring him out on the pod, because he takes over, doesn't he? So he's under my arm, looking, watching to make sure he's got rid of that horse. He doesn't think they should be here. So, talk about distracting. Anyway, these trees were probably packed in, 1 square metre, and they have to fight for the light. Sometimes a venerable old oak tree like this, which is probably 400 years old, had trees growing over the top of it, and it forms this epicormic growth as compensation. So it sends out lots of little branches with the twigs on. You can see them, tiny little, it looks like a bit like a witch's broom, but you often see on sycamore trees and sometimes on silver birch trees as well, these little growths. Anyway, this tree is extraordinary because there's a new phenomena out in the countryside called burr poaching. That'll make you scratch your head.
What, burr poaching?
Burr poaching,
What,
which
people
people
take
come
these?
in with a chainsaw and cut the burrs off the tree. The reason is they're used in wood carving, and they make beautiful bowls. And there was a wood carver in Norfolk. Sadly, he's no longer with us. His name was Patrick Blake, and he made his own tools to carve out beautiful bowls so thin that you can almost read the newspaper through them. And the grain is distorted. It goes every which way, but the grain isn't the burr just doesn't affect the outside of the tree. It goes right through to the heart of the tree. Remember, in its infancy, it was fighting for light. So this isn't where old branches have been cut off. You can see the burr has actually folded out the bark underneath the look.
Oh, I've just felt one. It's rock hard, isn't it?
Absolutely. They're like rocks, but the new crazes, I mean, each burr, I'll shock you, in English money it's worth between £200 and £300. So it doubles the value of the tree, but wait for it, if this tree was felled, and I can assure you it's not going to be, because it's burred, the trunk is 4 feet through at least, and it goes up best part of 20 feet dead straight. That would be used for table making for furniture, and a good decent butt on an oak tree is worth about £1,000. One with burrs like this well over £10,000. Just unbelievable.
It's
so that's
incredible.
why it's absolutely crazy. But that's the phenomenon. That's what you saw in Blickling. But this is a proper oak tree with burrs on it, and so it's really a reaction to not enough light in its infancy and its youth. And the burrs, the distorted grain will go right through to the centre of the tree, right into the heartwood, and they're phenomenal. That one above us, I mean, if you cut it off, you couldn't lift it.
There's a slug enjoying that one.
Yes, yes.
So they are rock hard when you don't knock into one.
So I did have a tree that came down a few years ago, and there was a burr on it, and a gentleman bought it off me, and I thought he was absolutely crazy. He gave me £250 for it, and he made pencils out of it. And absolutely beautiful. He showed me one, and it was absolutely stunning. So there we are. So there you are, but a bird oak, no less.
Well, a burr in the hand is worth.
Yes, exactly, because we do have a plant that's all sort of prickly, and it is called a burr or a burdock as well.
Well, thank you for the photograph, and lovely to hear from you, Christine. Lots of other questions. Justin and Rachel tuned in Shropshire, and they send a photograph. Although Scotland is not his usual territory, we've just been on holiday to Dumfries and Galloway, and I wondered if Chris may be able to identify what's in this photograph. It's a mystery footprint.
Yes.
So we've got the photo here.
It's perfect, and I'll just open up the sheet so that we can both have a look.
It's not Bigfoot, is it? Or something?
Not quite. There we are. Right, I hold those.
Oh, well, hang on. There's a few toes there, isn't there?
Yes, sharp claws, not a webbed foot because it's on the side of a lock. My first instinct was to say otter. It's about the right size, but there's no webbing. There's a heavy heel print, and then 4 very distinct pads, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a slightly smaller one to the left. That's the hind foot, that's the front foot, and without doubt, 100% certain, right beside us, behind us in this area of woodland, a badger.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Brock himself. Great big, short legs, heavy feet, and long, long claws, which always surprises everybody. The claws are up to 50 millimetres long and used for digging, sort of nature's original farmers, if you like, are excavating the land. So there we are, perfect. And it was lovely to see your footprint beside it as well, and that gave me perfect example of what size the prints were.
Hello to Tony Clark. What an action-packed programme we've listened to this morning, they say. We've got regular listeners there with Tony and his other half. So thank you very much for that message.
Yes.
What else have we got? Bumper postbag, as always. Oh, Storm Kathleen is mentioned. By way of apology for my namesake's visit last week. This is from Kathleen. Don't worry, we don't blame you. We don't blame you at all.
And she sent an interesting video, which I have yet to see on the farm computer, and it's of a crow detaching bird spikes from a building and throwing them down onto the ground. She said it's very amusing to see and quite educational. So there we are. And they're the bird spikes, Matthew, all over the car park. The crows actually detached them from the building. I have noticed them all around buildings in Norwich. So really funny to see that.
Good for them.
Yes.
What else have we got here? Oh, we've got a bit of verse for you.
Yes.
I know you like a bit of poetry.
Yes.
Hello to Ray Dumpleton. Hi, Chris. I share your delight at the return each year of our swallows. And it reminded me of the song by the folk blues singer and ace guitarist Martin Simpson. Dark, swift and bright swallow. April sun on Slapton Lee, between the lagoon and the haunted sea. I was thinking of war and cruelty, when spring's first swallow split the sky, and I was lifted above all care as the swallow swung through the salted air, come from savannah and desert and sea to mark another year for me.
Perfect. I couldn't have put it better myself. Isn't that lovely? We just love a response like that. And when you visited the farm this morning, before we came down to the woodland, we were both enjoying the farm swallows there. And look at this, the sun's just come through the trees, and that's changed the vista in a second from spitting April showers to bluebells illuminated.
You can almost see the bluebells physically moving to the sun, can't you?
Yes, absolutely incredible sight, isn't it?
Jim Sheehan, listening in the United States. He comes from a place called Pepperell in Massachusetts. Thank you for your note, Jim. He was talking about waxwing. Well, you talked about waxwing recently. And Jim says, the absence of waxwings changed for me here in Massachusetts 3 years ago when a migrating flock discovered our shrubs. The birds feast on the bright scarlet berries for 3 days and then move on, returning annually to feed en masse. These winterberry shrubs are remarkably tough and productive, and I've included photographs of the feeding going on. And there are the red berries and,
look at that.
And those gorgeous birds.
Yes,
look.
I am envious beyond belief, because still at the tender age of 74 3/4, I've yet to see a waxwing in the flesh. I just missed them here this year. They were just a few hundred yards from where we're standing, but beautiful birds, the wandering bird.
So thank you very much for that photograph, all the way from New England.
I know, Massachusetts. I lost my teeth then.
Massachusetts. It
Yes.
reminds us of the Bee Gees.
Exactly that, yes.
And Stephen Lane says, Chris, have you got turtle doves on your farm?
I have a hedge especially for them, and lots of newly planted wood, which is perfect habitat. Last year I was recording in the woodland and I heard a male turtle dove purring away at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in early June, and sadly it moved on. It hadn't got a mate. The last time they bred here was about 20 years ago. There have been frequent visitors passing through. The habitat is here for them. Even a special field with one of their favourite seed plants, which is called fumitory. I encourage that particular plant here, and I visited Sicily a few years ago and saw the turtle dove reserve there, and I saw perhaps getting on for 100 turtle doves, and the whole sort of vista around me was filled with that fabulous purring sound. They're a migratory species, and I think it's Britain's fastest declining bird species, and its cousin, funny enough, the collared dove, is Britain's fastest increasing species. So really odd.
But one migrates, the other one doesn't.
No, that's right, yes. Very risky thing to do, to migrate.
Thanks for all the correspondence, and you can join in on the podcast every week with an email and the address chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk.
Yes, look at that. And the perfectly behaved dog. I've
Look
just
at that.
let him down, and he's sitting there waiting for his master to come and do what he would call proper work, which isn't standing under a bur oak in amongst the bluebells. This is not proper work, and so he's coming to rejoin us.
You saw that horse off anyway, didn't you?
Yes, treading very carefully and very delicately through the bluebells without jamming them down. What about that? And sitting down. Perfect. Well, thank you, Matthew, for your visit, and it always just helps illuminate, which is quite a difficult thing to do, to capture the majesty of this. I mean, you can't do it with words. It's a whole sort of sense-filling experience, isn't it? Eyes, nose, ears, with the birds singing, and this terrible terrier that's wanting to be picked up. Here he is. Good boy.
Well, thank you, Ratty, and thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome.